All right, guys, cheers. It is Thirsty Thursday. We still observe that, at least during COVID-19. So, cheers to you guys. And it's humid as all hell. It rained like crazy last night. The temps went up. Very muggy right now. So, I have a list. These are the last detailed items. You don't need to zoom in. I'll read it. So, we need to fill the diff, fill the engine with oil. I need to buy oil and a filter for it. I put it off last week, but I did buy the additive for it. I need to install my fans, wire my tack, install the exhaust, install the booster, install the master. I started finishing up one brake line, but realized I threw out the line that had the 3/16 half-inch fitting, meaning 3/16 ID, half-inch for the master cylinder. I need to fill radiator with coolant, which we like to use the G05 because it passes the visual inspection at the track. I'm sorry, I run coolant. In 10 years, I've never puked coolant down the track. I always check, and but we run the G05. It's like clearish, very light yellowy tint. It passes. If you ever ran water in your car, it'll melt. It'll blend in with the rust. I need to check all the vacuum ports. I need to do the trans line, the vacuum line for the modulator. I need to measure for the drive shaft length because we have to order one. I'm going to upgrade to a nice 3.5. I forget if it's a 3 or 3.5 inch, but it's a nice beefy unit. Same company that did my drive shaft that fucked it up on the cutlass, but it was kind of a mistake on both ends, I guess. Whatever. I did get the front tires. They weren't supposed to come until June. I need to fix the EGR threads on the intake, so probably drill and rethread. I need to get a tail lamp bulb. I need to make a throttle bracket. And I need to hook up the trans lines to the radiator. At this point, we're not going to run a cooler because it's been working fine. Bleed the brakes, and that's about it. So we got like a nice little notepad full of shit to do this weekend, and we should be able to knock out everything except some of the big items like tires and drive shaft. I still have to order the rear drag radials, and between the drag radials and the drive shaft, we're talking about $750, and that's really hard to do right now all at once. So I am probably going to wait until a little later on in at the end of the month. Technically, this car will be done on time, just due to the way that everything is going on. I cannot spend outside of my means. I'm not dipping into any savings. I have depleted my selling parts money, if you will. So I sold a bunch of parts to bring money in for the project over the winter, and that has been depleted. At this point, we are completely riding on whatever we can pay for. That money literally ran out last week when I spent $350 on fluids for a bunch of other fucking cars. So either way, it's Thursday. It's the first day I've really been able to come out here and do anything. The week's been busy. Projects at work that I really needed to get on, I did, and I kind of wore myself real thin at work during the 8-hour day. My arms were ready to fall off Monday and Tuesday, blocking on a 57 Bel Air. And yesterday was Wednesday, and we went to my sister's. They had a birthday parade for my niece. I decided to take the Olds. We didn't make it in time, but we still drove the car out there. We had it out for about 2 hours. As always, the car runs great, but it's going to bring me to my next point. And I guess this is where I have to kind of, it's hard to explain. But first of all, let me ask my wife how long this is running. How many minutes we got on there?
404, 405, 406.
Okay, cool.
407.
So it's not very long. I didn't want to bore you guys. We got about, I think at most I want to do 15 minutes, so this will be quick. So, as soon as it got warm out, I took the car out for like a nice hour and a half drive. And I beat this thing like it owed me money, right? I mean, I drove it for extended periods of time at 4,000 RPM. I mean, I'm getting very comfortable at driving at high RPMs with my engines. And then the next day I took it to work. I've been driving it actually quite a bit. And I noticed that the oil pressure has always been sluggish to get up to its regular. I run 2050 on it. And I noticed that it was off at a very cold idle for a few minutes, and then it goes up to about 42 psi. Normally it's 44. It does not get to 44 until that oil gets warmed up. So I have a theory on that. So either way, that's what it's been doing lately. And then, the oil pressure's normal. It'll get up to about 55, 60 at normal racing temp, which I like to race the car at about 160. And when it's hot in gear, depending on how hot the car has been, usually like if I've been running it at running temp, which is the car will stay between 180 and 185. If I stay there for extended periods of time, the oil pressure will be between 25-ish, and it will bounce a little bit if the engine idle hunts. So the oil pressure will bounce with the variance of the RPM. But when we drove it yesterday, I realized that we had it in stop and go traffic, which is very odd. For me, I don't really drive the car in traffic, but we did yesterday because we were going to my sister's, and it's about a 20-mile drive, so it's 20 miles there, 20 miles back, about 40 miles in traffic, all that shit. We drove it almost for 2 hours. So, mind you, we're right outside Chicago, so despite the COVID-19, there was still quite a bit of traffic. So what I noticed was, we got to my sister's, I parked the car, so we can talk to each other. We were curbside talking. This is the first. We were curbside talking. We were in the car. They were on their sidewalk, and there's like 6 feet of grass between us pretty much. And we were talking for about maybe 10, 15 minutes. Fired the car back up. The oil pressure was as normal as it normally is. About 42 at idle, cruising 55, 60. And then as we got further on down the road, it started to go down a little bit as normal. My numbers are normal, but I'm starting to think that I got a couple of issues working against me. One, I run an engine diaper, and although a lot of guys say it does not affect temperature, I think for a car that sees the street, a lot of heat saturation, heat soak, ambient underhood temps get high. I think my oil is getting thin. Thin to the point where I think on some of these longer drives, my oil pump isn't happy. And when I did I did an oil change earlier in the week, and I fired the car up while it was on jack stands, and I can hear the oil pump whirring in there. So I think the oil pump is starting to get wore out. Mind you, this was a used pump that I bought, and it's a good pump. It's an old, it was made by, I believe, Dave Smith Engineering, and sold under Kenny Bell, which was, big Buick guys. And so I did take the pump apart. I checked it. Everything was good. But we've been beaten on it, and I think that at this point, well, hold on. Let me reiterate that. So not only do I have this weird oil pressure issue, which to most people, they're saying keep driving it until it drops significantly off the charts. So my comfort zone would be if it drops to like 35 PSI cold, then I should worry. Obviously, this oil PSI thing happened. I noticed it maybe 2 weeks ago. I've been driving the car here and there. Yesterday was a pretty long drive. I fired it up today. It's been raining. Oil pressure was normal as it's been the last 2 weeks since that one drive. So clearly we got a very slow wear thing going on if that's the case. But the other thing too is yesterday we're driving it and we get to one of the first probably long red lights, and my idle is hanging high, like if I had a choke. This thing has never idled at 1200 in gear. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Tap the gas, and the engine revved up like super easy. I'm like, whoa. So I kept driving it. I just kept an eye on it. It was doing some weird stuff. I almost pulled over to check on it, but it went away. Right? And we got to my sister's and everything. And then on the way home, it did it again once we were closer to getting home. So I got home, popped the hood open, fired the car up. Idle was decently stable, but it was hunting a little bit. So in my mind, I'm like, it might be a vacuum leak. As the engine's getting hot, the intake's expanding a little bit, and whatever little breach and seal we got is letting air in. And I sprayed brake cleaner. As you can see, it's still sitting on the core support. I sprayed it, and it's the number 8 cylinder intake runner is leaking. And I think I blew it out, which explains a couple things. I've been smelling a little bit of oil, but it's not puffing anything out of the exhaust. Plug is clean. And I'm just been mounting it up to, I don't run a PCV valve or any evac or anything like that, so I get a lot of gases from the combustion chamber that come out through the breathers, and I have open element breathers. Well, I'm probably sucking in a little bit of oil in number 8. And then, so we got a bad intake gasket, and then my oil pan has been leaking since last July. I think it was on my birthday. The track safety personnel made it a point to tell me that I am dripping a little bit of oil. And it's the back of the oil pan. It is not the rear main seal, but it's been dripping. It hasn't changed much because my pig mat in the diaper is still clean, which is why I actually put an engine diaper on it to kind of get me by. And I thought I was going to have enough time to pull that engine out and do this, but then literally, like, it's actually sad to say this, almost 2 months ago, this whole COVID-19 thing started, and I started, changing my plans. So I think once the Bonneville is done, I'm going to pull out the engine and not only fix my oil leak, not only fix my intake leak, but I think at this point I owe it to not only myself but the people who helped me out with this engine to go through it, make sure everything's good. And clearly at this point the engine's still running good, no smoke, no knocks, no weird noises, revs to the moon, and I think that I'm just going to take it out and go through it once the Bonneville's done, so probably early June. Take it out, go through it, and go from there. And if there is damage, then I think, depending on the severity of damage, we're going to make an assessment on whether we either build the big block, because I almost have everything for that. All we need is a couple $100, which would be like the machine shop billing odds and ends. So I think our budget our make it or break it budget would probably be about $1,000. And that would have to get trickled out over like a month and a half period. So if I do take the engine out in early June, I don't plan on having the car back out, no matter what our contingency plan is, until middle of July, end of July. So our assessment of the engine has to be about $1,000. I would have to find a good running big block for plan A, for about $500 to $600. And our plan B would be to wrap that engine up if we can make it happen for about the same price. But there's a couple of things, and it's hard to explain. I'll touch on it later once we get to that point, that, again, I'm a budget guy. So I have like 3 options. One option which is completely contingent, and it comes down to if I can find a running engine at the right price, which right now having a spare running engine would be beneficial to us because we have two cars running right now. They're both still running. The olds just annoys me with that vacuum leak. So that put me over the edge to just say, fuck it, that engine's coming out. So this is almost done. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks we get it done and we can get it wrapped up. And in June, the engine's going to come out of the olds because I cannot have 2 dead cars in my garage. As soon as I have 2 dead cars in my garage, I need to move one of them. So I've learned that lesson the hard way in the past. I had more cars than I ever should have on this property, and I've learned the hard way. So that's why I cannot have any more than 2 projects going on at a time and 2 daily drivers. Both my wife and I have a car. So that's what's going on. And again, Olds is running great. The other day during lunch yesterday, I took it out and I made like 3 full pulls on this thing. Probably shouldn't say that, but I mean, I was on it and beat on it for at least 25 minutes during lunch, and then comfortably drove it to my sister's. But clearly the intake leak is an issue, and then we got that little oil leak, and but besides that, everything's good. I mean, I didn't see a big alarming rate of. I didn't see any major flake. I didn't see any bass boat flake in my oil. There's a couple of big chunks here and there, which I haven't pulled out my distributor in almost since the engine went in. So it could be the distributor gear. I had that problem in the past. But again, we have to start assessing things once we get to that point. But for now, the engine's completely running fine. Everything is good. But there's a couple of things that are alarming me, and I have too much time invested in this engine, more money than I've ever invested in any other engine. And I've had friends that, put time in on this with their work, and I think that combination of things really makes me think more rationally than irrationally. Normally I'd say fuck it and send it, but I'll let you guys let me know what you think. So on that note, we're going to sign off. Share, like, subscribe, follow us, hit the like button, tell your buds. You know, we got Oldsmobile power in the house, but we do love this big Pontiac, so we'll see you.